Today I'm speaking with Andrew London. Andrew is an amazingly talented and clever songwriter, singer and musician. He has a reputation for his witty, satirical lyrics that comment on everyday life in New Zealand, ranging from politicians to COVID to televangelists. I've been listening to Andrew's music for over 20 years and love his ability to write gorgeous tunes with lyrics that always tell a story, often with a barb attached, as he mentions in this interview. I hope you enjoy this discussion, and if you do, please take the time to like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference. Thanks. Reading a bit about you, someone reviewing one of your albums described your lyrics using the word wordsmithery, which I thought was a great term. Because your lyrics are amazing and they're clever and they're funny and they roll off the tongue very easily, which seems very rare in a lot of songs these days. And I read that on your website you describe yourself as primarily a songwriter and a satirist. So I was sort of interested how you actually see yourself, because, initially I thought, does he see himself as a singer or a musician, or maybe an artist as a songwriter and maybe a social commentator, which is what of your songs are about? How do you sort of see yourself primarily?
Look, I'm a jack of all trades, actually. I decided, we moved up here to Otaki in 2000, so it's 23 years ago, and while I was wondering what I was going to do, I had got extricated myself from a retail business that was killing me. And I was wondering about what I was going to do. I was thinking about going back to university. I was thinking about doing some other things. But while I was mulling all that over, I started saying yes to gigs that came my way, because people often used to ask me to do gigs. And for years I'd turned them down because I'd been very busy running this retail business in Wellington, musical instrument shop that I had. And so I started saying yes to everything. And very soon I discovered that I was busy enough to support myself. And I thought, well, this is okay. I'll just keep doing this. But in order to do that, I was saying yes to lots of different things. I'm lucky in that I'm a singer and guitar player, so I can go and do stuff by myself. But I had quite an unusual musical upbringing, which gave me quite a broad spectrum of interest, musical genres. So if people said to me, I need a little jazz trio to play in the background while we release our new product at the car emporium, I could say, yes, sure, I can do that. And I'd hire a couple of guys and do that. Or if they said, we want a country band to play for a hoedown for a motorhome convention in Hawke's Bay, I would say, yes, I can do that, sure. And I'd pull out a country repertoire and do that. Or they might say, can you come and play the blues club this Thursday? And I'd say, yes, I could do that. And I'd get an appropriately skilled 3 or 4 other collaborators and go and do that. Or we've got a wedding or a corporate function. Can you play a repertoire of classic rock hits that everybody can dance to? And I go, sure, I can do that, because I've been doing that since 1979.
But none of this was your own music?
None of this was my own music. But that was what I started doing 23 years ago, and I was just saying yes to everything and developing a group of people I could call on to do that, to join me where it was appropriate. I never thought much about writing music. I'd written half a dozen songs in my life, most of which were rubbish, and in most of which situations I'd been collaborating with other people, and it was for a bit of a laugh, and it was quite fun, but I wasn't very good at it, I didn't think. And then the motivation for me to start writing was that my wife Kirsten and I used to receive visits every now and again from her uncle, Mike, and his name is Mike Knock, and he lives in Sydney, and he's quite an internationally renowned jazz piano player, and spent a lot of time in New York, and the last 30 odd years in Sydney teaching at the jazz school there. A bit of a legend in jazz circles, and Mike would come to visit, and he would say, "How's it going, man?" Got a trace of a New York accent, which he picked up although he's from Stoke, Nelson. But he would say, "How's it going, man? How's the music, And I'd say, it's great, Mike, having a good time, Who are you playing with, man? And I'd say, well, I'm playing with Terry Crayford. Oh, Terry's a good cat. Yeah, I used to play with Terry and Nelson. Yeah, he's great. And what are you playing? I'd say, well, we're playing mostly jazz standards, and a bit of Western swing and even a bit of rock and roll sometimes. Yeah, but are you playing any of your own stuff? And I'd say, no, don't have to, man. There's tons and tons there's hundreds and hundreds of jazz standards. That great American songbook, and Terry knows all those songs, and so we do lots of those. No, yeah, man, but, if you don't play your own stuff, you're just like everyone else. And I thought, he's pedantic old git, But, it got in though, and I was thinking about it. So I had to go at writing something, and I was playing with Terry Crayford at the time, and our repertoire, as I say, was based very much on the Great American Songbook. We were called Hot Club Sandwich, and we played in an up-tempo swing style, modelled after the Quintet de Hot Club de France, who were a very popular band in the 40s in France. So you had a guitar player, Django Reinhardt, and fiddle player, Stefan Grappelli, and a particular sound, which was a bass and a couple of guitars and a fiddle. And that sound was one we really liked. And Terry and I had recorded a bunch of standards for Radio New Zealand in the early 90s and in that style. And subsequently, whenever we were asked to do a gig, we played in that style, which we liked. So when I sat down to write something, I tried to write it so that it would fit seamlessly into our repertoire and not sound incongruous. So I wrote it in a minor key in an up-tempo swing style, so it sounded a little bit like something that Django and Stefan might have played. And it was called I've Got to Get Myself Some New Friends. It was a very cynical song. I'll play you a little bit of it just because I'm talking about it. She's never happy with her makeup. She's never happy with her hair. She's got a room or two devoted to Versace, but she doesn't have a thing to wear. Oh, I've got to get myself some new friends who share my attitude and style. Make sure we're seen in all appropriate locations. Sorry, I can't stop and chat a while. So it's very
Fantastic.
Cynical.
And it's lasted all these years. I mean,
yeah, we still do
still a
sometimes.
Fun one. For a first song, it's impressive.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Kirsten actually helped me with it. I was a bit stuck. I went to her and said, I've got the song. So it's very cynical, but it reflects my utter contempt and hatred for the fashion industry. What do you think of this? And I played it to her, and then it got to the chorus. I've got to get myself some new. And she said, friends. Brilliant. That's what. So she had a little bit of a hand in it, and it actually.
Does she help you with just a little tangent? Is most of it like all your work, the lyrics, or is there a bit of collaboration?
It is. It's 99.9% all my work, but she is an invaluable sounding board. I'll run it by her, and she's brutal. And if she thinks it's average, she'll say it's pretty average.
Good on her.
Yeah, it's very good. And then I'll mess around with it and change bits here and there. So, well, what do you think of that? Oh, yes, that's much better. Yes, that's much better.
I hate that when you've done something that you're quite proud of, and you just show it to your wife for some positive reinforcement and it comes back opposite. It's hard to recover from that.
It is. I struggle with it, to be honest, because I agonise over the lyrics, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to scansion and rhyming. Close enough isn't good enough for me. I like to get it just right. Don't always succeed, but I take a great efforts to make it as good as I possibly can. So when it comes up average, it stings.
So what do you enjoy best? Because you're also a very amazing performer. Just fun to watch and be there. If you could only do one thing from now on, would it be the artistic flair of writing or singing? Or...
Oh, it would. There's no... Terry Crayford used to say to me, once we had a repertoire of original songs. And Terry's been my touchstone. It was probably the definitive musical collaboration of my life. The dozen years that we spent together were very, very important for me. And Terry used to say, once you play your own stuff, and once again it echoes back to what Mike said, once you're playing your own stuff, you don't go back. So look, we go down to the RSA once a month or so, and we'll play Brown Eyed Girl and Proud Mary and April.
Or as you did this morning, a few covers at the cafe.
A few covers at the cafe, or we'll go and do anything. But there is no substitute for doing a concert for a paid audience who've come to hear you sing your own material. That's where it stops and ends for me, and that's what I'm lucky enough to do most of the time, I guess. We spend a lot of time travelling, and when we're travelling, that's what we're doing exclusively, is our own stuff, my own stuff.
And you're also an author of sorts, so I bought this book at your book launch. We were there.
Oh, did you? Good on you.
So you got $30 out of me.
Excellent.
So this is, for those that don't know, this is a book with a fair chunk of your songs with a little intro to them and the lyrics, which is great. And I started making a list of song subjects that you've sung about. And I had to stop because there was sort of no end in sight. You're quite prolific. So I'll just read where I got to. Breaking up, motels, teenagers, the warehouse, Trump, cafe breakfasts, travelling, whiteware appliances, rugby fans, weddings, male insecurities, gadgets, youth culture, socialites, coffee, parenthood, driving habits, politicians, COVID, toast, English convicts, televangelists, middle-age problems, getting old, which I can relate to, rich people, many Wellington themes. It goes on and on. And we were having a chat about this briefly this morning. Where does your inspiration come from for all these amazing subjects of everyday life?
Look, I think when I wrote that first song, that I've got to get myself some new friends, the thing I was absolutely paranoid about was writing yet another tune about personal relationships or something I see a cliche. I try endlessly to avoid the cliche. So I do tend to focus in on the minutiae of life, some little quirky thing that no one's ever written about. That I do it because I know no one's ever written about it. And I think, oh, no one's ever written about that.
So we were sitting this morning over breakfast and I was mentioning my despise of road cones and you said, oh, that could be a song. Is everything that happens in your life and every little subject, is that could be a song in your mind?
Sometimes, yeah. I come up with one or two a day, usually, ideas, but I usually forget them by the end of the day.
Do you write them down?
I should write them down, yeah. But, I've had a reasonable purple patch recently. I wrote this funny little song. Maybe I should do it for you because it's one that I haven't recorded yet. And it's about playing in restaurants. Which I still do occasionally, sit in the background, and play wallpaper. Set me up by the bar with my microphone, an old guitar with just the barman's company, that's fine with me. Or set me up by the door and I'll be just as happy as I was before. And I don't mind drafted courses or the noises from the street. Or set me up in the window jam like they do the girls in Amsterdam, and I'll smile and greet the passers-by with a cheery wink. Or over there where Dave Murphy's been by that rusty old cigarette machine, at least I'll have something I can lean on and a place to put my drink. But please don't make me play down by the toilets. It's not because I'm overproud or think I'm better than the crowd. It's purely just psychology. They pass me by so close, you see, that it's unavoidable that we will catch each other's eye. Then I will know that they know that I know that they are about to go, and I'll spend all their time in there getting paranoid about how long it took, and wondering if as we exchanged a look on entry, should we do the same on exit and share a moment in acknowledgement of a job well done. Or they look at me quite nervously while adjusting belts and corsetry, but I'm busy trying to play and sing, so a cheery wink is the only thing that I can do, which makes it 10 times worse, as you can quite well imagine. I look unnaturally interested, like some obsessive psycho. Oh, and if they come back a second time, then the awkwardness just becomes sublime. Should we greet each other like old friends, or do you think that I should just pretend that I haven't recognized their face? I mean, it's none of my business if they can't wait because of their mischievous prostate or overactive metabolic rate. So set me up by the bar, the door, the window, or the cigarette machine. Just please don't make me play down by the toilets.
It's so true.
Yes, it is true.
Who
yes,
talks
it is.
about
It's
that?
absolutely
But
true. Yeah, well, I play in this little restaurant about once a month down in Wellington, and I sit by the toilets, and it's awkward. People come past. What do? Do you engage them?
Yeah.
So nod at them, or do you ignore them?
That's a song.
It's a song.
How many of your songs are about your own experiences? Many or very few?
Yeah, probably all of them.
And then you've twisted it in some sort of artistic
or greatly
fashion.
exaggerated it.
Yeah. I mean,
They're mostly autobiographical to some degree.
Yeah. So a couple I thought, but they come home, about kids keeping on coming home. I presume there's some level of truth in there.
Oh, definitely, yeah. But completely exaggerated. Yeah.
Yeah. And 2 words.
2 words. Oh, yes. Weddings. Oh, God.
And one I wondered if you could sing for us. I Hug Me Mate. How much truth is in that one? Where does that story come from?
Well, yes. I hugged my mate. I've always been a hugger. Musicians are huggers. Perhaps it's because you share something quite emotional when you're playing. And once you've done that, you have a bond. So musicians tend to hug each other a lot. Whereas, I was brought up in a private boys' boarding school, where none of that nonsense went on. I mean, rugby was king, and we'd watch Colin Meads and Grizz Wiley and Ian Kirkpatrick and all those Sid Going, all those All Blacks of the late 60s. You score a try under the posts and then frown their way back to halfway, and they might get a pat on the shoulder, but that would be it. But nowadays, of course, you watch the All Blacks, someone scores a try, orgy of hugging and kissing and chaps patting each other's bottoms, and wow, it's lovely. I think it's really healthy. They can be a bit demonstrative
To a limit.
To a limit.
With
but none of that, of course, went on at Whanganui Collegiate in the 1970s. You can imagine.
Or Christchurch Boys High, where I went.
I'll bet.
Very similar.
I'll bet. Yes. I don't know why I thought that should be a song. It was one of those rare occasions where I wrote it. Actually, I was walking around in the garden. I wrote, the whole thing came out virtually in its finished form.
With tune as well?
No, just
Lyrics,
the words. I wrote it virtually as just a long-winded poem, and then I thought, how am I going to turn that into how am I going to put that to music? But
Do you want to show us?
Yeah. Well, I did manage it. No, I'm a Kiwi through and through. I'm an All Black follower, just like you. I grew up watching Pine Tree on TV. He'd score a try between the posts and trot on back with the other blokes with no display of joyfulness or glee. When I was brought up similarly, we don't emote spontaneously, and we try to avoid displaying affection publicly. Yeah, but something happened the other night that I'd like to share with the group tonight that signifies a strange anomaly. I was having a beer with a mate, you see, or a shandy it might have been actually, and he was telling me things were grim as they could be. He'd lost his job at the florist shop and got pulled over by a traffic cop who booked him on the spot for DIC. And his wife had wandered with his kids and shacked up with a mate of his who's consequently behaving quite aloof and rather smug. Well, I don't know what came over me, but just as we got up to leave, well, bugger me, I gave my mate a hug. You hugged your mate, I hugged me mate, you hugged your mate, I hugged me mate. By the time I realised what I'd done, it was just a bit too late. He was big and he was hairy, he was understandably wary, and it was scary, but I hugged me mate. "Yeah, what's that for?" he said to me, and I mumbled about solidarity and being there for your mates when times get tough. So he wandered off and I fretted a bit, but he seemed to soon get over it, and things got back to normal soon enough. But I was down the pub just after that. I was having a pims with another chap on a Thursday when they do that excellent Dylan salmon quiche. Dylan salmon quiche. Well, he looked distracted as we dined, so I said, "What's on your mind?" He said he heard I hugged me mate, and what was it like? Well, I said at first it was rather strange. We both felt awkward at this rearrangement of the traditional way that Kiwi blokes behave. But I said the moment of intimacy had been enjoyed by my mate and me, and it might have been even nicer, actually, had he shaved. I said I thought we should be allowed to show affection even in a crowd and not be afraid to let it out. So, well, he looked distracted as we dined. I said, "What's on your mind?" He said, "I've lost the words and I don't know what happens next." You hugged your mate, I hugged me mate, I hugged me mate. By the time I realised what I'd done, it was just a bit too late. He was big and he was hairy and he was understandably wary. It was scary, but I hugged me mate. I'll do a bit of this verse. Yeah, so we've all gotten used to it now, and we don't fret anymore about how we show affection indiscriminately. And we get together, put the world to rights on our normal garden happy nights in the spa pool with a tall banana daiquiri. And as Dave and I drove home last week from the ballet, he began to speak about how sensitive and caring we Renaissance chaps can be. And he agreed we certainly had progressed, said he rather liked the way I dressed, changed gear and put his hand back on my knee. I hugged me mate, you hugged your mate, I hugged me mate. By the time I realised what I'd done, it was just a bit too late. He was big and he was hairy and he was understandably wary. It was scary, but I hugged me mate. Oh yes I did. It was scary, but I hugged me mate. I was sensitive and caring and I hugged me mate. Yeah, well, usually I get the words right, but it was just about there. It's an interesting song that I wasn't sure about it, because I thought maybe it's bordering on the homophobic and it's making fun of gay people.
When did you write it?
10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was not intended to do so. It's supposed to make fun of the butch, homophobic, redneck Kiwi, red-blooded male who's so terrified of anything that smells a bit of gayness, you know. But I wasn't sure about it, so I sent it to 3 different gay couples that I know and said, "Look, what do you think about this? I'm a little bit, sceptical about it, And they all thought it was hilarious and said, yeah, that's great, Yeah, a lot of my songs are like that. I try to use irony a lot, and make a statement about something by stating the opposite.
Well, it's a question.
By overdoing the opposite.
Yeah, it's a question I had for you. I mean, a lot of your songs are about New Zealand themes or political themes. Not so much political, maybe social themes.
Yeah.
I read a quote in the New Zealand Herald. Someone was reviewing you and said, "Andrew's whimsical songs reflect the national psyche and playfully lampoon many of mainstream New Zealand society's obsessions and taboos."
Yeah.
And I was wondering, some of these songs like Arise Sir John, Donny's Bar, Get Back to Work, are they political stands that you're taking, or are they just a commentary? And songs like I Don't Recognise This Neighbourhood, Think I'll Buy a Yacht, Televangelize Me, are those social stands that you're taking, or are they just a commentary on what you see?
No, they're very much social stands.
They're a stand. You're saying where you stand on.
I'm deeply cynical.
Yep.
And I do get angry about stuff, but I like to dress it up with a bit of levity and humour, and sometimes it might sound silly and frivolous and corny. Even I know, especially things I've written in a hurry. But a friend of mine says there's always a barb. You've always got a barb in there about something, and it's usually because I feel strongly enough about it to stick it in there.
And your music's your forum for making your opinion known.
Yeah, I mean,
instead of launching on
what
Facebook.
else can you say about a politician who brings back knighthoods and titular honours and then gets one himself? It's a pretty
Is it possible to play that one, or is that a...
I haven't done it for years.
No, fair enough.
No.
It's a great song. Arise, Sir John. It's on YouTube.
I don't think I've ever done it publicly. Oh, only once, I think. Yeah. In fact, I had to practice piano for about 3 months in order to play it.
Oh, you played that?
I recorded it, yeah, played
right.
it on piano, but it was hard work.
What's your typical songwriting process? It sounds like it's normally lyrics first and then dream up a tune after.
Yeah, pretty much lyrics first. Yes, more and more so, in fact. And it's often a phrase, a musical phrase, and quite often a musical phrase, or a lyrical phrase at least, suggests the style and the feel of the song. Arise, Sir John. Arise, Sir John. It's a 3/4.
Arise, Sir John. You've been such a good servant. We can't thank you near.
Arise, Sir John. And I wanted it to sound a bit anthemic and hymn-like. Certainly very pomp and circumstance. Last night at the proms sort of thing that you.
In English.
Very English, yeah. Maybe even Gilbert and Sullivan. In fact, I've got a sneaking suspicion that a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan sneaks into my songwriting. I don't like Gilbert and Sullivan necessarily, but we did a couple of their shows when I was quite young at school, and it's that I am the captain of the Pinafore and a right good captain too. And that sort of marchy style creeps into a lot of my songwriting. I just can't help it.
And so the musical phrase, how does that then become a tune?
Well, it can have to do with the inflection of the words of the phrase. Let's talk about me. You'd sing it how you would say it.
Right.
Let's talk about me.
I'm much more interesting than you. Let's talk about me.
The phrase itself lends it. I mean, you've got the tempo. Let's talk about me. Okay, well, that's the speed at which it's going to go, isn't it? Da-da-da-da. And there's a little tune, not much of a tune, admittedly, but it's a melody nevertheless.
It's a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting point. And then I just build around that. And because I got into the habit when I was playing with Hot Club Sandwich, 23 years ago we started, and harking back to that, got to get myself some new friends. I got locked into a sort of a fast tempo swing style. And the difference between that and a Gilbert and Sullivan march is a very fine line. If you take those old standards, ooh, what a little moonlight can do for you. Let's talk about me. I'm much more interesting than you. Let's talk about me. It's exactly the same rhythm. Well, it is the way I play it.
And so you struggle to get out of that mode and do something completely different?
I do. Actually, I do struggle to get out.
Is that a good thing because it's given you people know what to expect, or is it a bad thing because do you find yourself wanting to do something different and you can't? Or
yeah. I wish I had a broader palette with which to write with. I mean, I've written songs in other styles, some of which I'm very proud of. But that's a go-to for me, that fast swing. I think also because it's entertaining, it's fast and up and it grabs people's attention. It's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
It's hard not to pay attention to some guy who's rattling off words really fast and thrashing away like hell on the guitar. Especially if it's a slightly angry song like Let's Talk About Me or Appliances. Well, it's not angry, but those quick songs that express a bit of frustration suit that style very well.
The funny thing is, for myself, I love, because I was brought up in a very religious, fairly strict environment. So, you're brought up with hymns and tunes and harmonies. So naturally, I just love beautiful tunes with harmonies. So songs like Play My Way Home, which I'd love to get play later, maybe at the end,
Sure.
is my favourite of yours because the tune is gorgeous.
Yes,
and it's not fast and funny and
No,
angry. It's just a gorgeous tune.
No. I do like writing in other styles, but they come down the pipe, as a friend of mine songwriting friend of mine says pretty rarely. You know? I go to... It has a lot to do with the subject matter too, I suppose. If you're trying to write something frivolous and funny, then an up-tempo, bouncy rhythm is apt. I don't write a lot of dour songs or profound. I've written a few, some of which I'm very proud of, like Emily Bay and.
It's also my favourite, equal favourite of yours.
Yeah, well, I'm very fond of that and proud of it, but it's way out of my usual songwriting zone.
What was your musical upbringing? Were you musical from the day you were born?
No.
Did you learn an instrument very early on? Or?
Well, I had what appeared to me later, and I didn't know at the time, but it became apparent to me after I left home. I had a really unusual musical upbringing. I was listening to the same things that all my contemporaries were listening to, so I was, growing up in the 70s, late 60s and early 70s. So, and everybody was into the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin and Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles, Joe Walsh and Creedence Clearwater Revival. You know, all the pop rock stuff. Anything blues based, I had a real affinity for. The biggest influence on me by far was the Beatles. I missed them. You know, I was 9 years old when they broke up in 1970, but I had slightly older cousins who were a couple of years older than me, and a couple of years at that age is very significant. And they were frightfully sophisticated and mature, and they had Beatles albums. They'd come and stay with us for a week in the Christmas holidays, and they'd bring these Beatles albums, and we played them endlessly, and I became an utter devotee, and it's never left me. I still listen to them occasionally, and they are by far the biggest influence on me.
Okay.
But at the same time, so I was listening to all this stuff that my teenage friends were listening to. I was already, I could sing you every note of every Beatles song ever recorded by the time I was about 11 or 12. And I followed them in their solo careers, obviously, through the 70s and 80s.
But you weren't singing or performing yourself at this point in time?
Not until about 79, 80. But the other thing that was really significant about my musical upbringing was that my father was a huge music fan. He wasn't a musician, but he was rabidly passionate about opera and jazz. And I never took to opera, but I lapped up all the jazz. I think because I could see what it did to him. I could see him in a state of just ecstasy, listening to Louis Armstrong's opening cadenza on West End Blues, or a dirty little Edmund Hall clarinet solo on Ambassador Satch, Benny Goodman, Nat King Cole, Count Basie. He loved Sinatra. We listened to a lot of Sinatra, Benny Goodman, Ella Fitzgerald, and the big band stuff, Glenn Miller even. Anything that came on TV, movies on Sunday that were at all musically related, and particularly jazz related. I must have seen the Glenn Miller Story a dozen times. High Society, similarly. The St. Louis Blues, the W.C. Handy Story with Nat King Cole and Eartha Kitt, Mahalia Jackson, anything. Even, God bless him, Elvis. They did an Elvis season on TV in the 70s. Every Sunday afternoon they played an Elvis movie. My father didn't think much of Elvis, but he sat us down and tied us to chairs, metaphorically, and I said, I don't think much of this guy, but they say he's pretty good. You ought to have a listen to this. So we watch Elvis and those awful movies that he was in,
So you were being force-fed these genres.
I was being force-fed it all. And Pete Fountain, the clarinetist, the New Orleans clarinetist, and I took it all in. I took it in. And I saw what it was. I saw exactly what it was that he saw in it. And I loved it similarly and still do. Neither he nor I ever got into the cool era. We could never find common ground with Miles Davis or John Coltrane or Thelonious Monk or Dizzy Gillespie. Fantastic as they are, were I've never been much of a listener to that stuff. It's always been pretty mainstream swing, not so much the Dixieland style, but it's small band, small swing band offshoots. His favourite was Eddie Condon, and mine too. Eddie Condon was a band leader in New York and Chicago in the 20s, from the 20s right through to the 60s, and a lot of his recordings. But you see, I left school at 17 or 18 with all the usual stuff that teenagers had in their heads. Frampton Comes Alive, and Hotel California, all of that. And anything blues related, particularly Lynn Skinner, the Allman Brothers, the English band Dr. Feelgood were all my favourites. But I had this huge knowledge of jazz and blues going back to Scott Joplin and W.C. Handy and Robert Johnson. I knew I could draw you a straight line chronologically between Scott Joplin and Led Zeppelin, and I understood the line from one to the other, and a perfectly logical chronological procession, and I knew all the stopping off points, and I knew who'd been influenced by whom, and the Beatles, why they picked up on Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and where they'd gotten it from, and how Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page had picked up on all those records, and I understood that, and it came as some surprise to me when I began collaborating with other musicians in my late teens and early 20s that none of them had any knowledge of that music. I didn't know anything about it, and my first professional musical activity was apart from covers bands. I was in one in Wellington for a while with a bunch of Samoan guys when I was 19, but then a friend and I managed to get ourselves on the Lion Breweries circuit. This would be 1980, I think, maybe early 81. And playing rock and roll. Two guys with guitars playing rock and roll, travelling around the country. We've cracked it, it was fantastic. A couple of years, and then I went back to Wanganui, where I'm from, and I played in rock, sort of blues, fused rock covers bands for a few years. But then the jazz began to kind of reassert itself, and I sort of pulled away from that and tried to learn how to accompany myself playing jazz standards like Georgia on My Mind and Mac the Knife and All of Me, and songs that I'd heard Sinatra and Bobby Darin and Bing Crosby and Tony Bennett sing, So and of course the Kiwi equivalents, Malcolm McNeil and Grant Chilcott. I was big fans of those guys because I could see they were Kiwis doing that repertoire, so I was really interested in that, and I gradually kind of went over to that side.
Are you self-taught on the guitar?
Completely, yeah. I never had a lesson.
Singing as well?
Yeah.
No lessons whatsoever?
No. Although I did attend a course that Malcolm McNeil. You're a Christchurch man, so you'll know about Malcolm. He was.
I don't know any of the stuff in detail that you're
Malcolm
talking
was
about.
New Zealand's preeminent jazz singer. He was. He put out 4 or 5 albums, I think, starting in the 70s, maybe the early 80s. A little bit like Mel Torme, a very genteel, accurate, velvet-voiced, classy vocalist. Collaborated on an album with Kiri Takanawa. I can't remember what it was called. Travelled to Britain in the early 80s, became quite close to Cleo Lane and Johnny Dankworth over there. So he made some inroads as a New Zealand jazz singer. And so I that was the guy in whose footsteps you would want to walk if you aspired to be a singer of jazz in New Zealand. So I always had a great deal of respect for Malcolm, and attended a course that he ran in Wanganui for a couple of days. But then a decade or two later, I was thrilled to be able to collaborate with him on a little tour.
Nice.
Got to play with him at Old St Paul's in Wellington, Tauranga, and another couple of places. A great man. Yeah.
You've mentioned Hot Club Sandwich. You've been involved with many different groups. So you've obviously got a big solo career and play a lot with your wife, Kirsten.
Yeah.
I was watching you play this morning together. Is there anything better than playing as a couple with your wife and husband and loving, the process of it? I mean, that to me looks like, is there anything better than that?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Because she didn't start off as a musician. She wasn't a musician when we met.
Right.
She just said to me, maybe 15 years ago, I've got an old Paul McCartney Hofner violin bass that I bought on an impulse 25 years ago, and I had it hanging on the wall. I'm not a bass player, I had it hanging. She said, "What does that do?" I said, "Well, that's a bass. It's a bass guitar." She said, "Well, how do you play that?" I said, "Well, it's not that hard, because you only have to play one note at a time. Whereas, I've got a much harder job. I have to play 6 at a time. She said, "Well, mate, can I have a go?" I said, "Sure." So I showed her a couple of simple songs and taught her as best I could. Well, but, she took to it like a fish to water, and before long, she was playing enough of my songs for us to go out and do
It's crazy.
a couple of gigs. It was crazy, but she got headhunted by a local group here in Kapiti.
And you saw her disappearing to
She went
greener
off.
pastures.
She said, no, she said, "I'm going to go and play with these guys." I said, "Oh, suit yourself, okay." Well, it didn't worry me because I was playing with Hot Club Sandwich and with a country band called the Cattlestops. And so she played for 5 or 6 years with this local band, Henpicked, which was 3 girls and a guy, and he wrote all the songs, most of the songs. And they were a very good band. They recorded 3 albums, played some festivals, played a lot of gigs locally, all original music, no covers. And that was very good for her. She did a little bit of singing with them. Similarly, she'd never been a singer. But her singing has come along in leaps and bounds. We've got this thing going now where she sings a lot of the songs that I have sung traditionally. And she could sing. Look, I've got quite a high voice and she's got quite a low voice, so our ranges are pretty similar or close. And she can sing my songs or parts of them in the same key that I've already sung them. So she will sing the tune in parts of the song and I can find a harmony. Because that's being a Beatles fan and having grown up singing along with Beatles records, harmony is a great joy for me. It's something I really enjoy above all else.
I'm with you, and harmony adds a depth to a song that if you don't have it, it's almost like 3-dimensional versus single-dimensional, isn't it?
Very much. It's the difference between colour and black and white. So it gives me a lot of joy to be able to sing harmony with her. And those are my favourite thing about us, our collaboration. Yeah.
It'd be good if we could talk about some of your groups that you play with, but in my list of notes, before that, one of my favourite songs of yours, which is a solo one, I think, is Beans on Toast.
Oh, yes.
Fairly recent, would it be? A couple of years, maybe?
I wrote it during lockdown, yeah.
Yeah. Any chance of doing that for us?
I'll give it a try.
Do you want me to hold the words up?
I haven't. You might have to. I haven't done it for quite a while.
Where did this come from?
Yes. Well, this is about a particularly culinary abomination that one is habitually served up in a particular cafe. And I can't tell you where it is, of course, except to say that it's somewhere between Wellington and Picton. It's all coming back. If I'm camping or I'm tramping through the desert or the bush, or sitting in my office on my sedentary tush, I need a little pick-me-up once the hunger pangs set in. So I go searching for the toaster and the Watty's baked bean tin. And there's an ecumenical consensus now, it's rumoured even that amongst the followers of Buddha, Jesus Christ and Mahomet, there's unanimous agreement on the rules concerning how they should be ate. And it's customary to always find the toast between the baked beans and the plate, which is why I raised my eyebrows at a cafe I was in, took a picture and put out a Facebook post. For I felt sure that I should share my indignation and chagrin at finding beans, you won't believe this, situated underneath my toast. We call it beans on toast, turn it back and everything. You might have to get the words out. Sugar beans on rice. No such thing as beans on toast.
Toast on beans.
Toast on beans. There's no such thing as toast on beans.
Well, some do, said the simpleton.
That's right, yes. Because I said to the waiter, there's no such thing as toast on beans.
Exactly.
No one's ever heard of beans on toast. Well, no one ever orders beans on toast. Well, some do, said the simpleton, and sneered a little sneer. And it occurred to me to offer him a clip around the ear, as I offered his preposterous proposition, plainly potty and perverse, that any punter could prefer his beans on toast with the ingredients reversed. Some, I said, some, who are these? Some who could compose this classic dish with its components incorrectly juxtaposed. Why, not even an Australian could so critify this and so callously corrupt the constitution of the core constituent parts. What's next? I can't
It's fantastic.
I haven't.
If you want the full lyrics,
yes, you have to buy the book, you see. That's just the teaser.
buy the book, the CD,
Yes,
go
that's
onto
right.
YouTube.
Yeah, I think it
It's
might
fantastic.
be on YouTube. Yeah.
So some of the groups you're in, there's probably more. Hot Club Sandwich that you've mentioned, Cattlestops.
Yeah.
Some of these are past groups. The Andrew London Trio, the Retro Pack, which is a current one with April
Phillips, yes.
Too Many Chiefs.
Too Many Chiefs.
Still a current one.
Yes, it is.
Are there any more groups?
Well, at the
Maybe
moment
smaller one.
we're doing a Beatles tribute show shortly as the Silver Hammers. But no, that's pretty much it. But you see, at any particular time, we're building up to a particular show. At the moment, we've just finished a Retro Pack show, so all our concentration has been on getting slick on 25 1920s and 30s jazz standards. So that's what we've been practicing hard for. Now we've got the Beatles show coming up in a week, so all our focus is on getting those Beatles songs slick. The day after, or the day before that, Kirsten and I are doing a show, a little house concert in Wellington with all these original songs. So I'll be spending the day going over Beans on Toast and I Hugged My Mate and all of those tunes of mine, which are quite wordy, and just going through each of them a couple of times so that I won't forget the words when we get up to do them. So that's the thing that I have to do now, in order to hold this in my head. You know, I've got to do a bit of preparation for each of these gigs.
But I must say, you know, this morning I can't remember what song you were doing, and a couple of words escaped your mind, but you've got the persona and been around long enough that, you know, you can turn it into a positive and an ad for the book, and whereas a lot of people couldn't get away with that. But I suppose when people have paid to come to see a show, you feel like there's some sort of responsibility to remember the words.
I try and be prepared, you know, as I'm obviously not today.
You're a professional, of course.
Well, look, actually, a word on that is that it's not something that actually came very naturally to me.
Remembering words, or
no, being talking to a crowd, being comfortable engaging a crowd, and making light of something if it doesn't go well. I learned at the feet of a master in the form of Wellington musician and radio and television personality Nick Tansley. Nick's a sort of was a cabaret artist, a radio jock, a TV host, and a pretty good musician. We played in a covers band for years called the Mod Squad, did a lot of functions around the country. And Nick, having been a cabaret star since he was about 19 or 20, has a gift, has an ability to stand up on a stage completely unprepared and engage a crowd and be funny and witty on the spur of the moment. And I watched him like a hawk for years, because I found myself very early on in my Hot Club Sandwich days, 20 years ago. I remember vividly. I remember the moment. It was at an arts festival in Taupo, and we were playing in this beautiful venue, the Spiegel tent, a sort of octagonal booth-lined, stained glass windowed venue that travels around the country. It was a magnificent venue. It was a sold-out concert. It was Hot Club Sandwich. I had Terry Crayford on my right, Nick Brown, fiddle player, on my left, and we got up there and were introduced and we played a song and everybody applauded and there was dead silence. And I looked at Terry and he looked at me and I looked at Nick and he looked at me and I thought, oh my God, somebody's going to have to say something here. And you're not going to, and you're not going to, obviously. And I thought, I'm going to have to be a front man. I'm going to have to say, hello, thanks for coming, nice to be here.
So that was never part of your forte as being a front man
I
from...
never had to do, well, you don't have to do that in rock bands, do you? You know, you just play the song and then rip into the next one while the crowd are dancing. Nothing in my musical upbringing had prepared me for that. So I watched Nick whenever we played from then on. We were quite busy in those days playing in this covers band at lots of functions and weddings and stuff, and I watched him like a hawk, and I picked up a lot of tips. And the most important thing is you have to be yourself. You cannot be anybody. I've seen a lot of people get up and they put on a radio voice. Hi everybody, nice to be here. Well, that was the Rolling Stones' Faraway Eyes. Now we'd like to do a song that was a big hit for Prince back in 1987. And you're toast, man. You try and do that, you're toast. Unless you can really get away with it. You have to be yourself. You can only sell yourself. You can't sell anything else. You know. Well, I couldn't. And so I was, and I'm a naturally ebullient and cheerful sort of a guy, so it works for me, you know. But that lesson to be yourself is a very important one. And you can just waffle on about nothing if you've got a microphone, and people are very forgiving. You know, if you're engaging and pleasant
and smile
and cheerful and smile.
And it's something I think you learn as you get a bit older. You know, you don't have to pretend to be someone else because
no, exactly.
Just a bit past that.
And all you got to do is say something nice about the organizer or the venue or the food, and introduce the guys and the girls that you're playing with, and tell them how this has become a big thing for me, is talking about the origins of the songs that I'm going to do. And I have a funny story that introduces most of them, like the beans on toast. You know, yes, well, it happened at I can't possibly say where it was, but it was somewhere between Wellington and Picton. Well, it gets a big laugh, of course, you know. Yeah.
So the different groups that you've played in over the years, obviously, you know, all the personalities are very different. The musical styles are different. The audiences are probably different. That must add challenges and interest.
Yeah. Yes, a little bit. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Because Hot Club Sandwich is where I first saw you. Probably, you know, when did that start?
Hot Club Sandwich.
Probably saw you 15 years ago.
Oh, much more than that.
More.
Actually 30.
Right.
30. Well, it started on a recording session at Radio New Zealand with Terry Crayford. Radio New Zealand had me in for 2 or 3 sessions where I would sing, you know, old jazz standards, and they liked me because it was pretty easy listening, inoffensive stuff, which was good fodder for national radio 30 years ago.
Not so much now.
Not so much now. But they said to me after 2 or 3 times, what would you like to do next? You know, who would you like to have? And I said, well, I'd really like to record with Terry Crayford, because he was a bit of a hero of mine. I'd heard him on a few albums by Kiwi artists, and I loved his style. His piano playing style was the same as the jazz players of the 30s and 40s, the guys that I liked, you know, Teddy Wilson and Willie the Lion Smith and George Shearing and Nat King Cole. Terry played a lot like them. I liked that, and so I said, right, I'd like to get Terry. So Terry and we had met and we knew each other vaguely, and I said, would you like to do this program? And we did. And we ascertained that we both quite liked that continental swing style of Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli, which was a very specific style of swing music. It was very up-tempo. There was no drummer involved. It was just guitars, fiddle and bass, mostly. And so we recorded a program of songs in that style. And so whenever I got asked to do a gig that was at all jazz related, I called him up and he would come and do that. And we'd get other guys to come in. And when I got rid of my retail business and came up here, that became much more important. You know, we were doing a lot more work, particularly at a cafe in Eastbourne called The Veranda. We were playing there every 3 weeks. And Terry and I were the nucleus of it, and we would get Neil Billington to play harmonica. And Neil could play that repertoire, but also, of course, he was a bit of a blues aficionado, so we would play some blues. Sometimes we would get Nick Brown in, because Nick is a fiddle player, and Nick knew that repertoire, that Grappelli Reinhardt repertoire. But being a fiddle player, of course, he's a little bit country, and being a Waratah, obviously. So we'd play a lot of country songs, but a western swing, and that worked pretty well. If we couldn't get either of them, we would get a saxophone player. We had 2 or 3 saxophone players. And of course, saxophone players are jazz players invariably. Niels Olsen, James Tate Jameson, Johnny Lippiett. They were all very, very good Wellington-based saxophonists. So we would do the Great American Songbook. We'd do the Gershwin, Cole Porter, Hoagie Carmichael repertoire, and it suited them. So we would get the personnel that were appropriate for the gig, but we would alternate them at this cafe in Eastbourne.
Which keeps the variety going for everyone.
Yes, the other guy we would get in often was James Cameron, who was a double bass player and singer. And I had gotten to know James in Wellington. He had a trio called the Velox Brothers, and they played 1930s and 40s swing, a lot of Nat King Cole, a lot of Louis Jordan particularly, a bit more R&B, rock and roll almost based, a lot of blues. Not so much the continental French style that we were playing, more the 4 on the floor swing R&B based stuff. But James used to come in and play with us a lot, and Terry, of course, who usually played bass, would then switch back to piano,
right,
which I really liked. They were my favourite ones, actually, because I loved Terry's piano playing. So that was a really interesting repertoire, and then I started writing, and we started adapting all of that to our original songs. And I was writing rock and roll and country and swing, you know, so I was actually playing and writing in some quite diverse styles, at least back then. You know, we did I was listening to a lot of an American band called Asleep at the Wheel, and we had I wrote this song called Living It Up, which we used to play, which is spent too many years in an office in the city, busy making lots of money, it's a goddamn pity, you gotta keep it running with the other rats everybody see. That's why I'm living it up, living it up, living up, living it up.
We might have to pause for a second, there's an upset. You have what looks like an insane full-on touring schedule. You look at either your newsletter, which you send out, or your website, and it's full on. And, you know, I've got to admit, you always look like you're having a great time. I guess it gets tiring and it's like it becomes a job at times.
Yes. Not so much as it used to be. I'm really glad to say, like as I said before, that, a lot of our gigs now are me playing my own stuff, which is very satisfying. I'd rather do that than anything else, and we're lucky that's what we get to do most of the time. But there have been times when I've been a jack of all trades, and I've been playing April Sun in Cuba at a wedding or something, and I start to think, you know, I don't like this song quite as much as I did in 1976. You know,
because we know as
it's a great song. It's a great song. Don't get me wrong, but I've done it few many times.
When I was looking at your touring schedule, for some reason that Paul Simon song "Homeward Bound" came into my mind, and I wrote down the lyrics and wondered if this is you at times. Each town looks the same to me, the movies and the factories, and every stranger's face I see reminds me that I long to be homeward bound. Tonight I'll sing my songs again, I'll play the game and pretend.
Yes, yes.
You know, and I'm not a musician, and I sort of just wonder, well, I guess it's a bit of that at times. But
yes, it is a bit. I don't mind the gigs. I don't mind singing the songs again. It's the travelling that I don't really dig.
Which must help a lot when you're with Kirsten.
Yes, it is. It's much better. It's much better travelling with her than it is with two smelly blokes. You know, I must say. Often we travel with somebody else. It's okay. And as I say, I enjoy it 90% of the time, 95% of the time these days. I did something I haven't ever done a month ago. I gave away a gig. I had a gig. It was at the local fire station for an awards night, and I knew what it was going to be. It was going to be 500 miles in Sweet Caroline, and the guy rang up actually about 3 weeks before the gig and said, "Now I need to talk to you about the repertoire." I said, "Oh yes," and he said, "I said, look, I've got a surefire repertoire of 60s, 70s, 80s." Classic rock standards, everyone will know every song. He said, "Oh, you did anything a bit more recent than that?" I said, "Nope." Sounds to me actually you might prefer somebody else's with a slightly more recent repertoire. So I rang around and found them somebody else, and it was quite liberating actually. I thought, well, gee, fancy that. Now, in the olden days, I would have panicked about that and quickly learnt a couple of Ed Sheeran songs or something, but I couldn't bring
Sell
myself.
your soul.
Sold my soul. Couldn't bring myself to do it. No, the travelling is a drag. We do long miles. Had a very pleasant experience recently, though. I've got this group called Too Many Chiefs, it's Rob Joas, who has a band called Hobnail, Wayne Mason, who's a bit of a Kiwi icon, and used to be Laura Collins, very good blues singer from Wellington and composer of excellent tunes. But Laura's kind of pulled out. So the three of us went to the South Island, and we played in Nelson and had a nice gig in Nelson, over on the ferry. Drove the van to Nelson, stayed the night, packed up, drove down to Balcairn, just north of Christchurch, did a nice gig in the hall there with Lorena Harding, great musician, songwriter from Canterbury. And then did another gig with her the following night at the Christchurch Folk Club. A great little sort of mini tour, and I quite liked that because I don't do it much anymore. I'm mostly travelling with Kirsten, so to go away with a couple of mates and have 3 great gigs and collaborate with someone new was fantastic. We did the same thing. We had done the same thing a month before. We'd been up north and played Thames, Tauranga and Palmerston North, I think, with Charlotte Yates, sort of filling in for Laura. So that was fantastic. We learnt some of her songs. But generally the travel, I find is a bit of a drag. I don't mind the gigs. I don't mind the gigs at all, especially if you're playing to an audience of people who perhaps haven't heard you before. Because the trouble with funny songs, a bit like a joke of any kind, is that it's only really funny once, maybe twice. And after that, you really want to have someone with you so that you can say, listen to this is funny.
I know what you mean, but the thing that saves it, in my mind, is the excellent musicianship. Maybe the lyrics we've heard before and the jokes a couple of times, but you can always admire amazing guitar playing and, a pan flute. You never get sick of that.
Yeah.
Which, to me, I can come and watch you over and over again, and
I tend to forget about that. Sometimes you should just sit back and enjoy the music. It can be quite fun.
And you wrote a little tune, I think it was called Row Matey Rag. Was that your tune?
It was, yes.
Which is just instrumental. Beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks.
Lovely.
I've only written a couple of instrumentals.
Yeah, love it. So it looks like you started at some point fairly recently to do extended tours, some winery tours in the Wairarapa and the Hawke's Bay, several days.
Yes.
And you also do Norfolk Island tours.
Yeah. This is a completely different kind of kettle of fish, which came out of the Norfolk Island experience. So we've played quite a lot in Norfolk Island. They have quite big music festivals over there. They've got a country one and a jazz one, and I've played them both on several occasions. And on one occasion, they contacted us and said, "Look, would you be able to perhaps organise a group to come with you, of your fans to come with you, and if you can sell the package to your fans and fill up a plane, which I think was, I don't know, 30 or 40 people, then we'll give you a little commission, a little kickback to come to the island. And I said, oh, that's an interesting idea. And we did, and it was very successful. And then, of course, they had to cancel. We actually never took the kickback. We would contra it into tickets and accommodation for our kids.
Nice.
So that became an annual holiday for us. We would get a sufficient number of supporters to come with us that enabled us to bring our kids over. So that was great fun. We'd have a sort of a family holiday, which is marvellous. But COVID, of course, put a stop to that. But I said to Kirsten at the time, why are we waiting to be invited somewhere to do that? Why don't we organise something like that ourselves? And we organised a 3-day jaunt over to Martinborough, staying at Pepper's over there. It's lovely accommodation. We did gigs and organised meals for our group in 3 or 4 different wineries. We did a couple of outings to the chocolate factory and the Stonehenge over there, and it was brilliant. It worked really well.
And you get to know each other really well.
Yeah, we had a group of 35 people or something, and it was marvellous. And we charged them all a package, and we organised it so they didn't have to spend a cent. Everything was paid for. We subsequently we found, though, it was very difficult to do by ourselves, so we recruited another local couple here who are good friends to help us. So between the 4 of us now,
with the organisational side and
with the
logistics,
and also on the ground, so that while Kirsten and I are entertaining the group of 40, we have a couple of spare hands who can socialise and help people with issues and liaise with the venues and do all of that. So, and it works really well. We call it Notable Tours, and we've done about 7 or 8 now. We're just off to Taranaki next week for 3 nights in New Plymouth. Yeah, so this is quite an important development for us, because it's a kind of a sideline. You know, it's what do they call it? A side hustle.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
It is a great idea. Yeah, because you know, keeping the wolf, as P.G. Woodhouse would say, no further than the vestibule, can be quite a challenge in the music business. So having an alternative thing that you can do that generates a bit of income is crucial.
And getting back to the Norfolk Island theme, the song Emily Bay, did you write that for one of the gigs there, or did that inspiration come after a visit there? Or?
Yes, it did. Yeah. It's obviously quite a dour little song. I wrote it very much in a sea shanty type of sound. I hoped to evoke the era of the penal settlement, you know, back in the 1840s. Yeah. I could do it, if you like.
I love it.
Yeah,
and your voice is so powerful, especially at the end, you know, when he's talking about being thrown in the grave, and it's quite almost emotional.
Well, it's a very it can be a very sobering place to visit if you do the rounds of the museums. There are 2 or 3 on Norfolk Island, and it had that very, very dark history as a British penal settlement in the early 1800s. And if you spend any time delving into that while you're there, it can be, like I say, quite moving. And I wrote the song actually when I got back here. I got up in the middle of the night and did it, actually, strangely enough. Johnny was a wild one, got sent down 7 years hard in Sydney town to lying. Elizabeth cried on the dock, says he, you're a good girl, Lizzie, don't you wait for me to lying. Johnny was a thief, he's quicker than some, got caught with a bottle of the captain's rum. Blood runs down to the sand on Emily Bay. and the blood runs down to the sand of Emily Bay. Judge said, well, I can turn a hard man around. You can do the time out in Kingston town. Johnny said, well, you can cut a chain for me, but curse your eyes till the day that I'm free. Johnny took 100 till the blood ran black. Chaplain said, that's a dead man's back. Blood runs down to the sand of Emily Bay, and the blood runs down to the sand of Emily Bay. Jackie said, the brother, come along with me. Gonna kill me, a copper been worrying me. Johnny said, well, Jack, I've been thinking just the same. They got 3 more before the soldiers came. The commandant said, you're gonna hang this morn. England, sorry that you ever been born. Blood runs down to the sand on Emily Bay, and the blood runs down to the sand on Emily Bay. Johnny was a wild one, got sent down. Never did a year in Kingston town. Elizabeth cried on the day she read. He was thrown in a hole, not a prayer was said. And on the murderer's mound you can hear his plea. You're a good girl, Lizzie, don't you wait for me. Blood runs down to the sand on Emily Bay, and the blood runs down to the sand on Emily Bay, and the blood runs down to the sand on Emily Bay.
Gorgeous. I'll just wipe away the tears.
Yeah, oh, thanks, yeah.
But it tells a story of,
Yeah.
you know, Australia's and our colonial past that most people have either never knew or forgotten. So, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I wrote it. I was in a band called the Cattlestops at the time. It was a country band, and I'd started it because I'd heard that Colleen Trenwith had moved to Otaki. Now, Colleen was the fiddle player in the Hamilton County Bluegrass Band, who were legends, household names in New Zealand in the late 60s, early 70s, and went off to Australia and toured with Slim Dusty, and went to Nashville and played the Grand Ole Opry, and just musical icons in this country. And she'd moved down here to look after her aging mother, who's in her 90s. And as soon as I heard she was here, I sought her out, and I said to her, you've got to come and play, and there's this country band I'm starting, which I hadn't. She said, oh, okay. And she was very gracious, and I grabbed James Cameron, who was playing occasionally with Hot Club Sandwich, but mostly with the Velox brothers. And James and I are both fans of Western Swing, which is a type of country music. And so James was my first port of call. I got a hold of a guy called Dave Berry, who's a Wellington guitar player, and a drummer I was working part-time with called Evan Williams, and we formed this band called the Cattlestops. And Colleen was our sort of mascot talisman, if you like. She was the heart of the band, and she played a very poignant fiddle part in that song, which we recorded for an album. It was wonderful playing with her, and I learned a lot from her about not playing. She was a very gracious and well-mannered musician, and she would not play at all unless there was space for her, and she would never play over the top of anyone else. To observe her playing was a discipline.
It's something I notice. When you follow a few people on YouTube, a girl I follow called Rena Del Cid. It's a sort of a stage name, but when they play together, you notice how little they play.
Yes. And
what they do is outstanding.
And the bigger the band, the less you have to play.
Yeah,
the less you should play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. slightly different subject. When we were emailing setting this interview up, you kindly sent me some lyrics to some new songs you've written.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this morning that reading through them was interesting because I had no idea what the tunes were. So, and they're quite long.
Yeah.
So they're a story in themselves. And,
Yeah.
you know, it was very interesting. One was called The Ballad of Old Tom,
Yeah.
12 verses long, which tells a story about a very well-respected guy in a community, a lot of voluntary work, and was aware that he had this standard to uphold, and he let himself down at the express counter
Yes.
by taking a couple of avocados too many.
Yes.
But
it's a whimsical sort of a tale, but
another one of these new ones was called Hey Man, which was a very topical subject, you know,
Yeah.
for a local musician, which talks about the challenges of surviving and making a living in the age of digital streaming.
absolutely. Subject very close to my heart.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Is it harder to make a living in today's day and age than it used to be?
Much.
Because you talk about CDs. I don't have a CD player, and I don't know anyone who does, you know, so...
Well, how quick has that happened?
Yeah, I know. So it's a problem, isn't it? And this, as the song says,
Well, a lot
you
of
don't get anything off Spotify, so how do you sell your work? Is it touring?
a lot of people are unaware the return to the artist for streaming a song on Spotify is 0.007 cents. So you know you've got to obviously get your song streamed a billion times to make anything. I read a great article recently which was saying how musicians we've had it easy. We've had a good 100 years, you know, since Mr. Edison invented his wax cylinder in 1903, and shortly after which you could buy very brittle but quite convenient 78 RPM records to play on your gramophone, and people started to make lots of money out of recorded music. But as soon as the digital format arrived, and Apple started putting tunes on their iPod, the writing was on the wall. You know, shortly after that, they figured out that actually you didn't even have to buy a piece of hardware. All you need to do was log into a website, and suddenly now you can access anything you like virtually for free. Or for $14.
Musicians are terrified, I guess.
Musicians, the return to the musicians is almost nothing. And that's been very sad, because recording and selling music has been, for an artist like me, if not incredibly lucrative, at least there's a point to it. You know, you might cost you $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, which is cheap, to record an album at a local studio. Much less if you do it yourself, of course, but I don't have the technology or skills. But you know you'll get it back. If you sell 500 CDs for $20, you're going to get it back. But suddenly you can't. So the motivation to record, and thus even to write, is not as great as it was.
So is there a solution on the horizon? What's the answer for your future?
I don't think so. The solution is to get out and play.
Yeah.
And charge people, because of course, major international artists used to perform relatively cheaply. And the payoff, hopefully, would be that you would buy their album. That was the whole point of it. But now it's a complete reversal. You know, now they want $250 a seat for you to go to their show, and they're giving away their album. Was it U2 that gave away an album recently for free or something? I can't remember. Anyway, I've written a little song about it. Hey man, I like your song. I'm trying to find you on Spotify, but there must be something wrong. Tell me, how do you spell your name again? Is it L-U-N-D on what? An O or whatever? Hey man, thanks a lot. I'm grateful for the compliment, but I'm sorry to say that song is not on Spotify or any other streaming platform, see, so you won't find anything there at all by me. Hey man, that's such a shame. How are people ever going to hear your stuff or get to know your name? I could add you to my playlist and share you with my friends, and then they'll get to hear your stuff as well. And isn't that how things trend? Hey man, I'll tell you what. I got CDs here, and if you really like the song that much, why not just buy one now, take it home? I mean, it's only 20 notes, or download it from my website. It'll cost you 10 at most. You can stick it on your iPad or your laptop or your phone, and all those songs you heard tonight that you like, you can listen to again at home. Hey man, that's no good to me. I never play music now, just hear it all for free. And I have to say, I think you're being just a little greedy, by the way. I mean, asking folks for money and expecting them to pay. I mean, I could listen anytime I like to Sting or Leonard Cohen, so what makes you so special? I mean, you're virtually unknown. Hey man, I guess you're right. But hey, thanks for being interested and for coming along tonight. And I'm glad you had a good time and were a little bit entertained. And maybe we'll see you next time if we come this way again. So excuse me while I pack up my guitar and microphone. Got to get back out there on the road. Still a week till we get home. And we're on our way to Devonport for a gig tomorrow night. And we thought we'd try and get halfway there tonight. So I'll pack up all these speakers and I'll pack up these CDs, and I might just play one in the car because we do that occasionally. And when I listen, I'm reminded of the places and the times I was in when I wrote every song and what was on my mind, and how some came really easily and some were really hard. And then the time we spent rehearsing and recording in the studio and designing all the artwork and learning all the words and then organising gigs to get them out there in the world. So good luck with your playlist and enjoy your Spotify. And I'll do without the 7/100ths of a cent that I would be receiving if you stream the song. And I know it's mean of me, but that's pretty close to nothing, and I just can't bring myself to make it free.
And what's to be said to that? That's, I think, probably a song from deep down in your heart, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you can't complain about change. Change just is, it's just what happens. It's just the way things are. So there's no point in bitching about it, but
but it's the way it's real life.
I think the annoying thing is sometimes people's attitude now has changed. They now feel they're entitled to hear anything you've done for free, and maybe they are. But it's sobering to think that that the concept of buying recorded music will be as alien to our children as it was to Beethoven in the 1800s.
I think it's an internet thing. We get our maps for free and we get our search for free, and we expect anything on the internet for free, and why shouldn't music be? We probably don't even think about it.
No, I'm sure people don't think about it.
Apart from people like you.
Yeah, they do occasionally get indignant when I say, I'm sorry, my stuff. I mean, all the Hot Club Sandwich stuff is on Spotify. Cattlestops is on Spotify, other stuff, but I just, none of my own current stuff from the last 10 years. I started to put it up there a year or two ago, and I thought, what am I doing? I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to be discovered. I don't have to be in the scrum.
A big thing that came out of COVID was the musical Let's Talk About Me.
Yes.
Can you just maybe briefly talk about how that came about, if you can do briefly, and something completely different? I think you were doing some acting in it.
Yes.
What was that whole experience like? And I just need to say we did book for it, but it was cancelled because of COVID, and then we couldn't make the next one, so I'm gutted, but we didn't see it.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. I've got this friend, April Phillips. We collaborate occasionally in the Retro Pack. She's a very good jazz singer, and we have a lot of fun performing, and we've known each other for years, both come from Wanganui. April said to me one day, she said, your songs, they sound a bit like they belong in a musical. And I said, oh, yeah, I suppose they do. I said, it might be the Gilbert and Sullivan connection. They sound a little bit like that. And also because the device that I use in songwriting a lot is the introductory verse. So I'll just allow me to demonstrate. Donny's Bar, for example. And this was a device that was used a lot in Broadway musicals. Cole Porter and the Gershwins and Rodgers and Hart, people that were writing music for Broadway musicals, used this a lot. So there's a bunch of dialogue, and then there's a a rubato introduction to the song where there's no timing involved. So you're not jumping straight from dialogue into the song. It's, welcome folks to Donny's Bar. We know you've come from near and far to sample our exciting new array of cocktails and aperitifs, you'll notice with hygiene motifs. We're keen to keep those viruses at bay. Our boss is absent, sad to say, he's off out playing golf today, but come on in, sit down, have a drink. We've lots to tantalize and appetize, disinfect and sanitize, sterilize your system, you'll be feeling in the pink. Perhaps a handy Andy Shandy might just get you in the mood. It comes in even lavender or pine. So you've got that introductory verse, which has no tempo. It's almost conversational, and then you launch into the rhythm of the song.
About Trump, by the way, for those that didn't get the...
Yes, there's that one obviously was the hydroxychloroquine that Mr. Trump recommended that we all take to get rid of the COVID. And I think that's partly why April said your songs sound like they come from a musical, because I use that device a lot in my writing. And I said, well, that's very funny. Yes, I'm a musical, good idea. Well, why don't you write it then? You're a playwright. And she's written quite a lot of plays which get produced all around the world. And we had a laugh. She said, I haven't got time. I said, fair enough. But then shortly after that, I was talking to another friend, Wayne Mills, who said, I've often thought, Andy, that your songs sound like they belong in a musical. I said, well, funny you should say that. April Phillips said the same thing to me, and I said she should write it. And he said, well, why doesn't she? I said, she's too busy. He said, and he's a finance guy. He said, what do we have to do to get her to do that? I said, well, I suppose we need to free her up so that she can put aside some of her other projects and spend some time on it. He said, right, well, we need to raise some money, don't we? So, well, okay. So we formed a little partnership. We talked to April, obviously, formed a partnership and set about trying to raise some money to free her up for a few weeks so that she could sequester herself somewhere privately for however long it took and write something. It's a long story, but she did. And she wrote it, and she sent it to me, and I thought it was brilliant. She just took a whole 25 songs, and she'd managed to weave a narrative around them about a frustrated middle-aged musician who was in an unhappy relationship because he wanted to play his own music but was condemned to playing covers in weddings, and a lot of it was obviously autobiographical because my songs are autobiographical largely, and I thought it was genius. I said to her, this is just absolutely brilliant. Now we need to we need to stage it. And she said, oh, I hadn't thought about doing that. And I said, well, and Wayne said, well, of course you have to. You absolutely have to. You have to do it, And I said, well, who should we get? And she said, well, I've got an acting troupe. There's 4 of them who they do a lot of work together. She does a lot of theatrical work with these other 3 guys, 2 girls and a guy, and she said, I can get them involved if you like. So we did, and I said, well, who are you going to get to play the lead character? And she said, well, you. And I said, don't be silly. I'm not an actor. I've never done any acting. Well, I hadn't for 35 years. So, no, you'll need to find someone else. So we talked about it, but she and the director, a colleague of hers, Fingal Pollock, they basically just bullied me until I agreed to do it. And I was up for it, to be honest. I thought, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, so I have a go. So I basically auditioned for them, and they said, yeah, it'd be great. And it was quite good because I didn't have to do a lot of acting. The character was me, basically. I think she'd done that deliberately.
Did you enjoy the experience, or were you
yes
terrified?
And no. Well, I was terrified. It was a terrifying experience. It was very demanding. Very demanding.
But probably euphoric once you had finished each show.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I don't know if euphoric's the right word, but
I think it probably was. I was certainly. I was really hyped after doing it. We did 4 shows in Kapiti, almost sold out, 340 odd seats a night, which was great. And it went quite well. We had a great band. Part of the whole concept of the show was that there'd be a band on stage, a 4-piece band, because it had a very musical theme. So the band had to be part of the show. We got Wellington guitarist Nick Granville to be MD. He was excellent. Greg Crayford, Terry's son, played drums. A friend of Nick's, a guy called Michael Crawford, no relation, played keyboard and saxophone, and Kirsten played bass.
Nice.
Yeah, it was.
And how did that feel for you, not playing your own songs, probably for the first time ever?
It was pretty difficult, actually, listening to other people do
Yeah.
my songs. Yeah, I mean, I have heard other people do my songs, and it's quite flattering. But they made a really good job. These were actors, not so much singers. You know, they were actors who sang a bit, and it wasn't easy for them to start with, but they all absolutely nailed it. I was really proud of how it ended up. I thought it was pretty good. I'm no judge, but I thought it was pretty good. And then we went to Wanganui 6 months later, and we played at the Opera House in Wanganui and did a couple of shows there. I don't think we'll do it again. It's a very expensive undertaking. You know, it's about 15 people all up, involving the acting cast and the musicians and the crew. You know,
Is there any video footage of the whole whole thing?
Not that's public yet. There might be. There might be at some stage. We did video an early show, so we might be able to get some up at some stage. I'm not sure, but I think the idea now is to just put it to bed, put it in Play Market, so that if anybody wants to do it, because we had approaches from a couple of other Blenheim, I think, Amateur Dramatic Society, whatever it's called down there. They were keen to have a look at it. So we just have to get the charts and the script and everything.
Might be a good thing for school end of year productions or something, but you wouldn't want to have it trashed either, would you? And lose your brand.
I don't know. Yeah.
I've got a final few questions.
Sure.
This one's from my wife, and she's a very intelligent person, but not such a deep question. When I said, "Have you got any questions you'd like to ask Andrew?" and she said, "How long can he hold his breath for?"
Oh yeah, well,
Because some of these songs are
yes, they
very wordy.
Well, a lot of them were written in the dead of night, with everyone in the house asleep, the kids and Kirsten asleep. So I'm trying to be very quiet. So I'm actually doing it in my head. I'm not actually singing out loud. When you're writing songs, lyrics in your head, you don't have to breathe.
Yeah, true.
So I write them,
Now
and
you
then
have to go and perform
go to perform it and think, why is this so difficult?
What was I thinking?
It's difficult because I didn't leave any gaps to breathe. That's why. Yeah. So it is a perennial problem. Yeah.
Can you maybe just talk a little about the importance of children being brought up with music? I know myself and all my brothers were, we had to play the piano from the age of 8 to 11, whether we enjoyed it or not.
Right.
But, whether it's an instrument or singing or writing lyrics, what does it do for a kid that has it as opposed to someone who's got no exposure to music?
Oh, there's quite a lot of study being done on this, quite a lot of research that kids who learn music develop other mental skills, mental agility that they wouldn't otherwise have the benefit of. Same for languages. And I guess music is a similar thing to a language. And it's mathematical as well, so there are a lot of crossover skills from learning music that are really crucial. That's from a purely sort of academic basis. For me, obviously, just having a house full of music and a parent or two that really enjoyed it and were passionate about it was totally influential for me. Our kids have grown up with music. Neither of them have really gone on to learn seriously, which is a pity, but it's always been my contention that unless you're passionate about it, you're wasting your time. I mean, I had a retail business that had an associated music school for a while, and I lost count of the number of people of our generation who would come in and go, "Oh yeah, I learned piano as a kid, hated every minute of it, but had to do it." Well, great, well done to the music teaching industry. You ruined the enjoyment of it for thousands and thousands of people. And actually, I'm a bit bitter when I think about my musical upbringing. I learned piano for a year. I was 9 or 10, and I learned it for a year. But it didn't mean anything to me. I was learning stuff out of the John Thompson's teaching little fingers to play.
Same, yeah.
Why didn't they give me John Lennon's Imagine? It's really easy. I could have learned how to play it quite quickly, and I would have thought it was so cool.
Yeah.
Or Let It Be, or Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are. These are not Elton John's, Your Song. Rocket Man is easy. Why didn't you teach me how to play Rocket Man? And I would have carried on indefinitely, because I would have been the life of the party. All my friends would have been impressed. I would have thought I was cool.
Probably because the piano teacher like mine was a 70-year-old lady that probably never heard of those songs.
No, you would have been taught that, Claire de Lune and Robin's Return, and give me a break. What was wrong with them? Why didn't they have any clues? It annoys me. It still annoys me to this day that the enjoyment of learning music for our generation was ruined by a stuffy elitist industry. Yeah, I'm not sure things have changed very much, actually. Oh, they probably have.
I'm not sure.
I think my kids, Izzy particularly, had quite a nice experience at the local college, Otaki College. They had a good music teacher that allowed them to learn how to do recording on a computer, and they had to kind of. We went to visited a suite in Wellington where you learned how to loop stuff, and engaging the technology with music making. I think it's a crucial experience for kids these days. Yeah.
Finally, have you got a favourite song you've written that you're most proud of, and maybe a favourite song to perform?
Well, Emily Bay had come pretty close, actually. I'm pretty proud of that. Yeah. And there are two or three others. We played a couple this morning. Sometimes I play one and think, my goodness me, that's a good song, isn't it? And I haven't played it for years. Not so much. Set Me Out by the Bar that I played before, I think might come pretty close to being lyrically maybe the strongest thing I've ever written. There's not a wasted line in it, Every single line is pretty close. Set Me Out by the Bar, yeah, I'm pretty fond of that at the moment. Emily Bay, I don't recognise this Neighbourhood. I'm quite pleased with. I could do a bit of that for you if you like. It's quite a rocky tune because I wrote it when I was playing a lot with a harmonica player, and it suits a harmonica style. But it's this is the one I wrote about the warehouse. I spent a long time introducing this song and explaining how my dad was a retailer. He had a family business that he'd inherited from his father. It was a little menswear business. They were outfitters for Wanganui Collegiate, and they measured gentlemen for suits and hire suits and sold nice clothes. You didn't go there for jeans and T-shirts. You went there for suits and jackets and slacks. But I was in Motueka one day 20 years ago, and we'd had a nice gig there, having coffee, and I was reading an article in the paper about how the mayor was so proud of Motueka having been allocated a warehouse. And I looked at the names above the shops up and down the main street of Motueka, and I thought, really, how happy do you think the owners of those family businesses are that Motueka has been allocated, is going to get a warehouse? I mean, they'll just be delighted, wouldn't they,
I left home at 17 and travelled far and wide. Spent a lot of time on the city streets and a little in the countryside. I've seen a lot of places, some people and some pride. Some will show you kindness, some will take you for a ride. Well, I learned about forgiveness and I learned about finance. Never let a sucker have an even break and never let him have a second chance. You want to play with big boys, be ready to get bled. Cause if you show a little weakness, buddy, you might just as well be dead. Oh, take me round the back roads, drive if you would. Just around this corner is where my old home stood. Oh, driver, take me around again, I don't recognize this neighborhood. Well, the old hometown town looks empty and the shopping centre's dead. No books or shoes or record stores, just an ugly big red shed. What happened to the places where they used to know my name? You know, I just drove through a dozen towns and they all look just the same. Ooh, take me around the back roads, try if you would. Just around this corner is where my old home stood. Oh, driver, take me around again. I don't recognize this neighborhood.
It's quite an angry little song. I think actually it has its roots also in my retail experience, which was a little bit traumatic towards the end. I realised how difficult it is and how ruthless you have to be actually in business sometimes. But the contrast between the little family business that my father ran most of his life and the huge global tin shed businesses nowadays that we go to for all our cheap Chinese junk that ends up in landfill 10 minutes later is striking, and I'm very cynical about that sort of stuff. But once again, it's change, change. Change is hard for us as we get older. I think we get more and more averse to it.
All right, that's what I had for you. So thank you very much again. It's been fantastic meeting you. And,
thanks for being interested.
Having a chat. And
nothing musicians like more than talking about themselves.
Would you mind playing Play My Way Home?
No, not at all.
It's a happy tune. I think you said the words are about nothing.
No, I
wrote it. You don't even know what they mean, is that right?
No, I don't know what they mean.
Yeah,
I had a friend come around actually. She was doing a course in photography, I think, and she wanted, the theme was movement. She said, "Can I come around and photograph your fingers while you're playing the piano?" I said, "Okay." So she did, and we spent a half an hour or so, and so I was playing the piano, and I wrote this while I was playing it. There are songwriters, I think, who write, and they don't worry so much about what the words mean. They just worry about what they sound like. I think Bob Dylan occasionally uses this, and I think Neil Finn sometimes uses this method. Just think of a line that sounds good. It doesn't actually have to mean anything. I think we, as lyricists, you can get caught up in this has to mean something.
And no one else knows anyway.
No,
I mean, this could be a story about your life.
Sometimes it doesn't have to mean anything. It's nice to have a Hercules going overhead, isn't it? Just while we.
It's about as slow as my plane.
Is it? It'll do a big loop, pointy.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so Play My Way Home. Yes, I don't know what I wasn't thinking of anything in particular, just fooling around on the piano, basically, when I wrote this. And it was on our Cattlestops album, originally.
Sometimes I don't play for the money. And sometimes I don't play for the beer. And sometimes I can't find better reason than to sometimes just play my way home. Even a rich man has to worry. Even a blind man gets to roam. And sometimes I can't find a better reason than to sometimes just play my way home. Oh, lights out, everybody's leaving. I've just got time to write one more line. Can't play the black notes when I'm sober. I can't play the white notes when I'm drunk. Sometimes I can't find a better reason than to sometimes just play my way home. Than to sometimes just play my way home.
Beautiful.
Cheers. Yeah.